Hi, everybody. My name is Buddy Gott. Welcome to this episode of Gotta Pop. I'm very thrilled today that I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite bands ever, and the band is Sade. Yes, I'm saying the band is Sade, and I'm going to be talking about this wonderful, legendary band with another fan, the very talented Jeffrey Harvey. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, buddy. Yeah, glad to be on Gotta Pop.
Well, it's great to have you here. I know we as soon as I had started this podcast, we were talking, saying that it would be great to have you on here because we know each other through a couple of places that we write on Medium.com. Well, there's the publication that I had started, Plethora of Pop, which you write for, and then the Riff, and then you write things for multiple publications there, and I guess on your own wall sometimes. I've enjoyed your writing there for
It,
probably most of the time I've been on there, about a couple of years now.
oh yeah, I'm all over Medium. So yeah, if you're poking around Medium long enough, you will probably stumble across one of my articles, whether you want to or not.
And I encourage everyone to check out his articles there. So, like I said, we're going to talk about Sade. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I wanted to double check before we did the show today was exactly how to say the band's name. Because there was a question when the band first came on the scene. You probably know what I'm talking about. I think it was on their first album where it said Sade. The first album was Diamond Life, pronounced well, it said Sade, but
Right.
there's confusion about that depending on where you live in the world.
And I think referring to the song Maureen, where she uses her own name, certainly Sade Adu pronounces her name Sade.
Right.
It seems like over time they've kind of capitulated to the American pronunciation of Sade, which is, I think, technically incorrect. But if you say Sade, people might not know what you're talking about.
Exactly. I did that to my wife a week or so ago when I told her I was going to be talking about Sade/Sade with you, and she's like, "Really, Sade? Isn't it Sade?" I'm like, "Yes, it's Sade, but it's pronounced this way." So we'll just go with what. Well, if we want to fluctuate between the two, then so be it. But I take it you've been a fan for a long time.
Yeah, my journey with Sade has actually kind of been interesting because my dad was actually a big fan. So I don't actually have a moment where I first remember hearing Sade. It was just kind of around. And I think Smooth Operator was probably the first song that really registered with me, just because from a very young age, I've had a fascination with like all things hard-boiled detectives, and it had that kind of mysterious vibe to it. And even as a very young kid, I just got the sense that whoever she was singing about in that song was getting it done. And I might not have known what it was, but I was pretty sure that guy was getting it done. So I think that was what initially kind of caught my ear. And then just very gradually over time, I started to appreciate it more on a deeper level. And gradually, I think I sort of co opted the band as part of my musical palette and not just an extension of his.
That's really cool. It's great when you can share music with, whether it's a parent or a sibling or some family member and connect that way. Um, I know when you mentioned Smooth Operator, that is probably the song that most people, at least in America, first learned by Sade. I think there was another single prior to that in the UK, but I am not sure about that. But that was the first big hit that I remember. I was already in my late teens when that song came out. That was in 1984. I was in my
Yeah.
senior year of high school, and it was just so popular right away. You had the video playing on MTV all the time, and then you couldn't escape the song on the radio. And I certainly did not want to. I fell in, like a lot of people, I fell in love with that song. And I'll be honest, I liked the video too because she's very striking, very lovely. I think I'm not by myself here and thinking that she's a beautiful lady, and boy, her voice totally matches that beauty. Her voice is so unique, so incredibly beautiful, and just I know I bought that album pretty much, I don't know, probably right after Smooth Operator became a hit, and I just, to this day, I would say that is one of my all-time favorite albums. I still listen to it regularly. Matter of fact, I'm going to write a piece for Medium that I'm going to have up tomorrow. It is right there, Diamond Life, and
For
that
our
came
viewers
out.
on YouTube.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I should specify that because we are on YouTube now, in addition to all the fine places that share podcasts in audio forms. But yeah, that out. Do you have all of them on CD? That's
I've
pretty
got
cool.
all of them. Yes.
That's great. That's great. I originally owned that one on vinyl, and I owned the first three albums on vinyl, and then the first one that I bought on CD was well, the next one
Oh,
after the
promise.
yeah, Love Deluxe, yeah, in '92. I guess that's the first one that I had on CD. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that first album, I don't know. I think it's almost flawless. Really, there's no bad songs on that.
Oh, I agree. And I think as far as a debut goes, it's hard to find a more assured and purposeful debut because I think it's not just a collection of great songs, but it really kind of introduces you to the entire world and worldview of Sade.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And let's backtrack just a second. Now, I had mentioned at the beginning, and I know I had seen you comment on this a while ago on online, in the fact that it is a band.
Right.
I think that a lot of people are confused, and it's easy to be confused by this because there is the lead singer who is Sade, and then there is the band that is Sade. And even yesterday, I had referred to, I was listening to the Soldier of Love album, and I posted about it
Yeah.
online. And one of my friends was just raving about, oh, I love her. I was great seeing her. And that's totally understandable. But it's a band, and it's a band that actually has been together pretty much without any major changes in the lineup since the early 80s. Well, I guess they were together in another band prior to Shut It. They were in a group called Pride, and then they broke off from that. But such incredible musicians in the band. You've got, I'm just going to name them real quick. You've got Paul S. Denman is the bass. He plays bass. He's also they all collaborate on the songs. He also writes
Yeah.
songs. Andrew Hale, keyboards, also a songwriter. And Stuart Matthewman, who plays guitars and sax. He's incredibly talented at both.
And in the later work does a lot of the drum programming.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Because they haven't really had an official drummer as a well, an official. Well, people are official drummers, but they haven't had an official band member who is a drummer since the mid '80s.
Yeah. Even
Yeah.
though the list of kind of featured players from album to album remains fairly constant,
Hmm.
I think there is that turn in the early 90s where they moved from primarily live drums to programmed drums. And I think certainly on that Love Deluxe album, most of that programming was Stewart.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. But it's such talented musicians, and I think we may have talked about this before, but it's interesting that the musicians in the band, other than Sade herself, have actually done a side project too, where they've
Right.
released a couple albums as Sweetback. Have you heard
Sweetback,
that
yeah.
music?
Yeah, I have. And as a matter of fact, well, I'm going to kind of detour here, but it does tie in with Sade because
Okay, sure.
Stuart Matthewman also was a producer and primary collaborator on the first two Maxwell albums. And this is a Gotta Pop exclusive. I've never divulged this before, but the first radio show that I did in college, which was a late night slow jams show, I actually patterned the whole aesthetic and vibe of that show off of Maxwell's Urban Hang Suite, the first album,
Oh.
produced and a lot of instruments played by Stuart Matthewman. So I kind of started with this vibe of kind of youthful sophistication and kind of built my core playlist out from there. So Sweetback kind of featured in with a lot of what I was playing. Sade, of course, and then kind of out and out and out. So to me, like Stuart Matthewman probably is right there with Sade Adu as kind of the two really
Hmm.
foundational members of the overall sound of that group, and certainly pivotal in my life as far as really when I took on this music as mine, as opposed to something that was kind of my dad's that I enjoyed probably more than I wanted to let on because
Right.
it was my dad's.
That is often the case in those kinds of situations. But yeah, Stewart is just an amazing musician. And I just today was listening to the first Sweetback album for my
Yeah,
first time. And I only got to, because I got like maybe two-thirds way through it. And it's the music is just what you'd expect it to be. I mean,
yeah,
it's fantastic. I guess they only released two albums. I don't know if they're still officially together, but I guess that one album was in 1996, their first album, and then I saw they released Stage Two in 2004.
yeah.
So, so I enjoyed the first album. I'm actually looking forward to listen to the second one as well.
Yeah, and the single off that album, "You Will Rise" in particular, I really like because it feels like a Sade song, but with a different vocalist, which kind of gives it a different flavor. Even though I think Amel Larue in general has certainly been influenced by Sade, she also very much has a different tone, a different delivery to her. So I still play that song periodically.
Oh, that's great. I'm curious to dive into that music more. And well, let's pivot back to that first album then. Like I said, and you agreed with me, it's such a great introduction to the band, and there's just so many classics on there. Of course,
Oh
Smooth
yeah,
Operator we had already mentioned, and then after that was what is probably it's hard for me to ever pick a favorite song by an artist, but I just love Your Love Is King. That has always been one of my favorite
yeah,
songs by them and just by anyone in general. I never will get tired of hearing that song. I love it. And then, of course, "Hang On to Your Love" was another hit
right.
off of there. And to me, it's funny. This is an album that I have played so much over the almost 40 years now, that every song to me seems like a hit, even though I know
Yeah.
that they weren't all singles. But I just love Frankie's First Affair. When Am I Gonna Make a Living? It's just all such great music.
And really, I think those are really kind of the foundational songs. And I'm actually working on a piece about this now. That there's kind of this whole other side of Sade that, because of the songs that were typically the singles and the hits, kind of gets overlooked. And that's what I call the struggle songs that really
Hmm.
kind of focus on the difficulty of life, the brutality of the world, and especially for women trying to navigate that world. And I think with Frankie's First Affair, we really kind of get this fascinating look at a young woman just really trying to navigate both the power and also the vulnerability that really come with being a woman in this world. And then later on, you've got one of my favorite Sade songs of all time, which is Sally,
Oh yeah,
which I think just really kind of sums up so much about that side of the group, where not only is Sade Adu really kind of showing us the human side of this sex worker, which again, factor in this is 1984,
right.
stigmas were still very strong,
Oh yes, very strong.
but then in really conveying what Sally does, she's really also showing how Sally sees the humanity in her clients who are also kind of outcast and overlooked and down and out. I think that song really captures so much of Sade Adu as a songwriter, which kind of gets overlooked because we think so much of the voice and
Yeah.
just the mystique and the live performances. But I think she's an excellent songwriter and oftentimes manages to convey a lot with minimal verbiage, which as print writers, like is something that is kind of a foreign concept to us, but I
Right.
think is very powerful.
Yes, I agree. And I actually, I mean, I have, like anybody, I have my favorites when it comes to an act like Sade. But the past week, when I was getting ready for our talk here, I went through and I listened to all the studio albums
Yeah,
again, like multiple times. And there were a couple that I guess when they initially came out, I didn't pay as much attention to as, say, the first album.
yeah.
It sort of like I love the first album. I've already mentioned that. And then I loved Promise, but I listened to that probably less than the first album. And then it sort of like continued on like that. Stronger Than Pride, I didn't listen to a lot when it came out. Go ahead.
Well, I'm curious what because I have my thoughts, but what do you think made you ultimately go back to Promise less than Stronger Than Pride?
Um, I think for me, in part, it may have been the age I was when it came out too, because like I said, I was still I was a senior in high school when the first album came out. The next year after that, I found myself in college and working part time. And I guess I had all these other things going on at the time
Yeah,
of the release, so I was not as connected. I bought the album as soon as it came out, and that was probably a period too when I would buy albums. And back then, I was playing like like three or four songs over and over again,
yeah,
and not listening to the whole album throughout.
yeah.
But you said you had a thought on that
Uh,
or what it might
for
be.
me, and I also went back through all of the studio albums before doing this, and I think if you're just going song for song, Promise stands up to any album in the catalog.
Hmm.
But for me, the sequencing, which is a rarity for Sade, is just all over the place. I can't really get into a flow on Promise the way I can on any of the others.
I think you're exactly right there. I think, and I felt the same way too when I was revisiting this album. I'm like, why wasn't I listening to this more over the past few decades? Because it is, like you said, the songs are great, but something the flow isn't quite as
Yeah,
great as that first album. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, it has fantastic songs, and certainly there were hits on it. I mean, you had "Is It a Crime," "The Sweetest Taboo," "Never as Good as the First Time." I love too. I like War of the Hearts, and
oh yeah,
love. Yeah, the instrumental "Punch Drunk" too is really
yeah.
great, yeah, I mean, it's a great album. Really, there's no bad songs on it, but I don't know. It would be interesting to, I don't know, make my own little version of that and change the order up. You've
Yeah,
probably done
yeah. I
that.
haven't done that yet, but I do think starting with Is It a Crime was a mistake because it's just too big, it's too melodramatic. And I remember that in programming my radio show, I'd always have to put that at the end of a set because what do you follow it with? And
Right.
I think that sets it up to where Sweetest Taboo feels slight following uh, uh, Is It a Crime? And I
Yes.
think it hits harder when you hear it on its own than in the
Hmm.
context of the album, where I just kind of use that to take a breath and recollect myself. I think had they closed out the A side with "Is It a Crime," it would have really given a punch. You'd have time to flip the album over
Yeah.
and then kind of start over on the B side. Or I think you could have opened the B side with it and then followed it with "Never as Good as the First Time," which thematically, I think there's more of a through line, and I think it does have a bit more punch to it than Sweetest Taboo does. So like that, just with those three songs, which I think were also the three hits, like
Hmm.
that's my initial thought on if I were executive producing, how I would start reordering things.
And I like the way that you're thinking there. I could totally see the album have been, maybe it would have been more appealing to me if it had been set up that way.
Yeah,
And I want to go back to something you brought up a few minutes ago in the fact that the songwriting, well, musically, of course, it's wonderful. And musically, it hasn't changed too much from the most recent things they've released to what was made back in the 80s. You know, the music is pretty much always consistently the same and is reliable, but I don't in any way mean to imply that it's boring. It's
right.
always great. And the lyrics, though, it's not just, well, her here I go saying her. The band's music is often very much identified with being sexy music. You know,
Right.
it's like romantic music, but lyrically, there is a lot of pain, like you had brought up. You know, in the
Right.
lyrics, in the songs, and I think that progressed as the albums went on. You saw it a little bit more on the songs and in the lyrics, and I've noticed that. Well, in some of the later albums, even more. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah, I'm very happy that I've revisited Promise. I
Yeah.
encourage people to check that one out. I think because of how long the band has been around, a lot of people might just pick up one of the greatest hits compilations
Right.
and you know go into that, and that's fine. You've got so many songs there just from the greatest hits. I think there's two really good. I think there's two anthologies that I
Yeah.
know of. But yeah, encourage you to listen to all the studio albums too. They're all fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm curious if other people do also find that in context, the love songs carry another weight
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
you're kind of looking at them in the context of this very dark and punishing world, where in some ways love is hard and it's also kind of the escape. Not
Right.
to jump ahead too far, but I sort of came to the epiphany that in a lot of ways, Soldier of Love, the song, is kind of like the band's mission statement of just marching through, and not just for romantic love, but sort of this fight to keep love alive writ
Yeah.
large.
Oh, I like that. Yes, I agree with you. That does seem like a good mission statement for the band. And well, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll just keep. We're already going like in order of the album, so let's just keep rolling with that. The next one, After Promise, was also very, very popular, and that was Stronger Than Pride. That came out in 1988, and that was, when I was
Yeah,
researching that album, it was much bigger than I had realized it was. I mean, you had five singles from it. It I think it was like all the albums. I think all the studio albums and even the live albums have made it into the top 10 or the top 20 here in the
yeah,
US. And I saw that in 2018, many, many years later after came out, Pitchfork magazine placed it high up on their list of the top 100 albums of the 80s. They placed it at number 37. And you had Love is Stronger Than Pride, Paradise, Nothing Can Come Between Us, Turn My Back on You, Haunt Me. Those were the five singles, and
yeah,
those are so good, and everything else on that album is great too.
yeah. And that's the one where I really remember kind of that turn where when Paradise came out, I remember that in real time, and that was
Okay.
playing on the stations that I was listening to. And it really kind of highlights another element of Sade that I enjoy, that for supposedly kind of mellow, quiet storm music, a lot of these songs like really have kind of a beat to them and a groove to them. Like you can play Paradise loud in the car, and you can nod your head to it. Uh,
Yeah, it's
but
true.
as time's gone on, like I really sort of have come to the conclusion that Love is Stronger Than Pride is just really a stunning song. And
It
again,
is.
another example with minimal words, it really conveys so much. And I think the it's the same verse repeated twice, if I'm not mistaken, but it just it fits. And I think she does that a lot in her writing, because with the music being so lush, you kind of need that second repetition sometimes to focus on that as opposed to what you're hearing sonically.
Yes, I think you're right. Absolutely. And one thing I didn't read any confirmation of this, but one thing I was wondering as I was like researching was I had mentioned before that the band members had been in a band prior to Sade called Pride.
Right.
And I was wondering if it was just a coincidence that they were saying they were stronger than the old band Pride, or I don't know. But regardless of that, which is probably wrong and just me being silly, it
And
is
was the
a
song actually written during the Pride era?
well, yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
question
could have
too.
been one of those deals like, the Human League had Only Human, and sometimes bands
Yes,
do kind of play with the names and in song titles.
yes, that's true. That's true. And that is a fantastic album. And that's another one too that when it came out, I bought it instantly, but I kept going to the hits over and over
Yeah,
again. And I'm so happy I've revisited it now. And it's a fantastic album. Like I said, it was just such a big hit, and all of their albums have been big hits. And what I found interesting looking at this too is I remember when the next album came out, Love Deluxe, in
yeah,
1992, and to me at that time, there it is right there. It's a fantastic album cover. That is probably my second favorite of the band's albums after Diamond Life.
yeah,
And what's funny is that was came out in 92. Stronger Than Pride came out in 88. But when that one came out in 92, to me it had seemed like it had been many, many, many years since the previous album, because back then 4 years was a pretty long stretch for an
yeah.
act to be between albums. Now
Right.
that's really nothing, especially
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
look at how Sade has been releasing things in the
yeah, yeah.
past
But yeah,
decade or
back then
so.
that was like a Michael Jackson interval.
Yes, yes. I like that. But boy, when that one came out, that kind of knocked my socks off. Not that the others didn't impress me, but I was just struck by every song on there. And of course, you had No Ordinary Love, that was
Yeah,
a big smash hit, and I remember that being featured in at least one major motion picture at the time, and that was
Indecent
oh
Proposal.
yes, yes. I was struggling there. I'm like, I know it's Woody Harrelson and Demi Moore, and yes, Indecent Proposal, which was an interesting movie, a very good movie. But and one of my favorite songs by the band ever is "Kiss of Life."
Yeah,
I still play the heck out of that song. Would you rank that album as
yeah.
being a
That's my
particular
favorite
favorite?
album by
Oh, is
them.
it?
Yeah, And I think the really interesting part there is because you mentioned the length of time between projects, but the
Hmm.
changes in music from 1988 to 1992 were huge. And they do kind of reinvent the sound here. They moved to the programmed drums. They started using loops. You hear a lot of elements of kind of down tempo and trip hop and those things coming in. But at the same time, it still sounds like a Sade record,
Yeah.
which I think of that turn from the 80s to the 90s, we saw a lot of acts struggle with that. Even if
Oh
they
yeah.
kind of found their footing again later in the 90s, those early 90s records got rocky for a lot of 80s acts. And I think one of the things this doesn't get credited enough for is being maybe the most seamless transition where you aren't really even aware of how thoroughly they had overhauled the sound until you really sat back and you're listening to a song like Feel No Pain and kind of, wait a
Right.
minute, this is kind of like Massive Attackish.
Yes, and and you're right. That's the kind of thing, especially if you were around back then, it didn't really strike you. But now, when I
Yeah,
look back on it and thinking of just what the music world was like in 1992, and you nailed it there, Jeffrey, just saying that so many acts who had been successful in the 80s did struggle with, not only the changing scene in the music world with, the advent of grunge music and things like
right,
that, but just the way things were being recorded was so much different too, because now you were fully into, CDs,
right.
and cassettes were, I think, already gone by that point. So, and the technology had advanced, you know, just
And
so incredibly much by that point.
and the advent of CDs, I think, further obscured really the essence of Sade because you mentioned on some of the other albums just kind of playing your favorite songs and not listening to the others. But with CD, you could skip with one button. And I wonder how many people bought the album for No Ordinary Love or Kiss of Life and never even really listened to Pearls,
Right.
which, like, I think is kind of the heart and soul of that album and kind of
Yes.
talk
Oh,
about establishing the world that we're coming out of and the height of the stakes, like that lays everything out. And like a tattoo as well, which is
yes, that's one of my
kind of
favorites on there.
a stunning song, and kind of an informal sequel to Clean Heart off of Promise.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I can see that. I hadn't really thought about that, but now it's great because again, thanks to the internet, I am, I'm listening to all these things so easily on
Yeah,
Spotify. I got rid of my physical copies of the albums years ago, and but the lyrics are all right there, and it's like, oh, look at that. There's an awful lot to this, and
yeah,
and being fans, we've known that from the first album. The
right.
lyrics are pretty wonderful, and it's more than just what you hear on the top 40 songs. Not that those songs are in any way, not as deep as the other ones, but yeah, people should really delve into the stuff that they don't know.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the video for No Ordinary Love?
She was a mermaid there, right? Is that right?
Yeah, she was a fish lady.
Yeah, officially. I have not actually seen it since the 90s. I remember liking it a lot at the time. Again, I'm not going to lie. I know my wife's going to listen to this, but yeah, I was like a lot of people. I had a little crush on Sade. I thought she was stunning. What were your thoughts there, Jeff?
I I think that video is a travesty, and I think the
Oh, okay.
combination of that video and the use of the song in Indecent Proposal completely obscured really the essence, the kind of
Hmm.
emotional ambiguity and the heartache that's really at the center of it,
Yeah.
and just really focused on kind of the sensuality and the exoticism of it all. Plus, like, okay, even if we suspend disbelief and accept that somehow when she gets out of the ocean, she magically grows legs, where does she get the wedding dress?
Right.
I
It's true.
and it's
And it's
perfectly tailored. I just did she rob a bridal store? I need to know these things, and again, that distracts from the essence of the song. But yeah, it was
I
the
heard they
early
had a great
'90s.
tailor there in that on that particular beach. I did it. That was showed up on Wikipedia today. I saw that. But it's funny. I feel like I sound like a big dummy here because I barely remember the video.
Yeah.
All I remember was that she was a mermaid in it. But I totally can see what you're saying, and I wonder too, like how much I don't know how much control the band had over how the video was made, and whether it was their input or if it was the record label, or they just got some director who decided, let me see how creative I can get here, and
I think by that point, with 3 platinum albums before that, they certainly would have had veto power.
yeah, I would
But
think so.
it was the early 90s. Everyone was doing these high budget, high concept videos. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Like I throw Michael Jackson's black and white video in that same pile.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that because well, yeah, that's a song I absolutely love. That's one of my favorite songs by him. But I think because of the video that had a lot of silly moments in it,
Yeah,
because you had Macaulay Culkin in there. I guess he was prominent in the video. I
yeah,
remember George Wendt from Cheers was his
yeah,
dad, and it was just like it was silly in parts, but it's a powerful song lyrically, and
yeah.
I
And
totally dig what you're
then
saying
suddenly he's
there.
smashing cars in an alley, and
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. I think especially between the music video for the Sade song and plus the Indecent Proposal, which was kind of it was a controversial movie when it came out because you had this this woman who was this couple. Well, I don't need to go too far into the movie, but people
right.
can look it up. But yeah, it didn't exactly sync up well with the lyrics in the song. And I know when you listen to Sade's music, yes, you can hear the romantic aspects in her voice. She's got such a powerful voice, but well, you can feel the pain too and the
Right.
struggles in
And the
songs, which I
defiance.
yes, oh, absolutely the defiance. I mean, yeah, she's just you hear that a lot, and more so than most people probably realize. And like I said, I think it just I don't know, it got stronger and stronger throughout the albums as you went on.
Yeah. I mean, a song we kind of didn't really talk about, but Jezebel off of Promise,
Oh yeah,
where she hits that, I guess it would kind of be the pre chorus of Every winter was a war, she says. I'm going to get what's mine. And just the way she delivers that line, like it's got some bite to it. You can
yes.
really feel kind of the frustration, the calcification that kind of comes from existing, to borrow a phrase from Pearls, in this life we didn't choose.
Right. Yes, you're absolutely right. And yeah, that's a song that I'm really glad that has come back into my life with
Yeah,
re-examining these albums, and yeah, and like I said, that's Love Deluxe is. Well, I know you said it's your favorite
yeah,
album, and after that is when they actually released their first best of album, and there was one new song on that. Well, it was a remake, but it had been the year previously in the movie Philadelphia. Please
right.
send me someone to love. And I don't know who does the original of that. Do you offhand?
Not offhand. And do you know, was that their first cover?
I think it was,
Yeah.
unless there was like some B side of a single that I'm unaware of. But as far as on the actual, well, yeah, I think that was their first cover, and I love it. That was one of my
Oh, yeah, me
favorite
too.
songs on that album on that soundtrack. Fantastic song, and I was happy to see when it showed up on the greatest hits.
Yeah, it really kind of brings the soulfulness and almost the bluesiness of her voice to the forefront in a way that a lot of the Sade stuff doesn't necessarily focus on.
Yes, you're right. And you want to talk about too, even though that is, like you said, a cover and not written by her and the other band members, it's you can feel that heartache too in her
Yeah,
voice, the being lonely. Please send me someone to love, and she sings it with such passion.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. That was from the movie Philadelphia. Which,
Yes,
do you remember offhand when that movie came out?
93.
Okay, so it was after Love Deluxe, which would kind of
Yeah, it
explain
was
this.
after Love Deluxe, and then yeah, like just right after that.
Okay, so
And I
that's
can't
why it
remember if it
didn't.
was released as a single or not. I think there might have been a music video, but
I remember hearing it on the radio, but because Sade was so huge, kind of in the Quiet Storm format, album tracks did get play, so that doesn't necessarily mean it was a single.
Right, right. But such a great song.
Yeah.
Definitely a great song. And then, boy, there was a large gap here between albums. Like I said, Love Deluxe had come out in 92, and you had the greatest hits in 94. That was the best of. And
Yeah.
then the next one, and I just love Love Deluxe so much that I was like, oh, yes, I can't wait for the next album. It'll probably be next year. Oh, wait, maybe it'll be the following year. And then you had, what do you have there in your, for my YouTube viewers? Jeffrey is holding. Well, if you're watching YouTube, you see what he's holding. He's holding the Lovers Rock album. So people who aren't watching the YouTube, you just kind of figured that out, I hope.
Which did
Yeah,
not come out until an entirely new millennium.
yeah, exactly. In the year 2000. And yeah, that's an amazing album right there. That actually, I didn't realize this until I looked it up today. I saw that it won the Grammy Award for Best Pop Vocal Album.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But that had some big hits on it. Probably the biggest being "By Your Side," "I Am by Your
Yeah.
Side," and "King of Sorrow" was on there. One song that I liked a lot too is "Somebody Already Broke My Heart."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. Do you how do you feel about that album? Is that
Uh,
you rank that one pretty high?
at this time, I didn't really spend a lot of time with it when it came out because at this point I was doing radio, I was doing my show, and I was also the urban music director at our station. So I had to listen to a lot of music coming in and listening with the ear of what can go on air.
Hmm.
This was so far out of step with what was popular at the time that I kind of listened through it, didn't really hear much that could be used in my format, and kind of moved on from it. Uh, Going back to it, I think it's a rock solid album. I think what it's missing is kind of those one or two real standout songs like the past albums had. Um, By Your Side is a nice song, but it doesn't quite have the heft or bite to it as a lot of the earlier hits. King of Sorrow is probably my favorite on the album,
Hmm.
but this was 2000, so like everything, even the R&B stuff was so hip hop heavy, it was just way out of step with what was going on at the time. So I think with me and probably a lot of other people, it kind of let the album fall through the cracks. And
Hmm.
from a radio standpoint, certainly on the urban side, I think this is before what they've called the urban adult format really became a thing. You had oldie stations and you kind of had the urban contemporary stations, and it didn't really fit in either of those. But listening to it now, I can let it run front to back, and it really is a vibe album. You really feel those
Hmm.
kind of trip hop and down tempo influences becoming more prominent here.
Yeah, and I have a very similar experience with that in that I was excited when it came out because I had loved the previous album so much. And I'm like, finally, there's a new album here. But I think at that point in my life, I was just, I had other things going on. I was kind of
Yeah,
into a totally different kind of music at that point. I remember, let's see, 2000, I think I was really into the Goo Goo Dolls and
yeah,
some of the other bands that were very big at that point. And I liked it when it came out, but a couple of songs grabbed me. But I had the CD and I played it a lot, maybe for the first couple of weeks, and then it just kind of
yeah,
started gathering dust. It wasn't that I ever thought it was bad, but for whatever
yeah.
reason, it didn't excite me a whole lot back then. But now I can listen to it, front to back, and it's fantastic, I think.
Yeah, and especially the two songs that really jumped out at me this time around are Immigrant and Slave Song, which are kind of like the prequel to what I've dubbed all the struggle songs that we've gotten on the previous albums, where we're really kind of going kind of back to the root of what's put these characters that she spent so much time chronicling into these desperate situations that they're in.
Yeah, and I'm excited to read this piece when you're done when you post that. It's going to be really fascinating. I mean, Jeff's a hell of a writer, folks. So you definitely got to read him. But yeah, those are great songs, and just the lyrics in them and the way
Yeah,
that Sade sings them is just fantastic. And I wonder too if maybe the album sort of slipped through. It's hard for me to say it slipped through the cracks, seeing that it won the Grammy, and I know it was a best-selling album, it was a platinum-selling album, but I don't think it had, it didn't grab people quite the way that some of the earlier ones did, at least at that time. But
And
I
the
wonder if it's
Grammys
because
do
some
have
of the
a
songs were a little heavier. I'm sorry, I
yeah,
didn't mean to cut you
and
off.
the Grammys do have a long history of awarding acts after kind of the height of their creative prowess.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that was their first album to win a major Grammy,
Yeah, I'm
but
not sure. I'm not sure, but you're absolutely right there. That happens a lot with them. I think I remember probably somewhere around the same time period, like I think Joni Mitchell had won the
yeah,
same award, and it's not that it was a great big bestseller or anything, but I think, and I don't mean to knock her album, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The Grammys do have a tendency to do that sort of thing, just like the Oscars sometimes do with like
yeah.
older actors or actresses who, well, that's a whole other show. Maybe we'll have you back for that one.
But
But
I think you're right. The heaviness of some of the songs uh, and the lack of kind of those romantic torch songs
mhm.
might have made it harder for people to connect with because "By Your Side" is a love song for her daughter. Uh,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. "King of Sorrow" is kind of almost blues over this kind of digital production. It was not necessarily inviting people who kind of cut their teeth on "Your Love Is King" uh,
Right.
or "Sweetest Taboo" back into the fold.
And it's funny, I didn't think about this until now, but I remember when I first bought the album, looking at the song titles and seeing King of Sorrow and listening to it, and immediately I had King of Pain by the Police pop into my head, and it's like, come on, Sade, this isn't exactly the feel good song of the year here, and certainly that's fine. It's fantastic, and I can appreciate it much more now in 2023 than I did back in what did we say it was 2000. But yeah, it is a great album. It's good, and somebody already broke my heart. I had mentioned, and
Yeah,
I was curious to see that that was actually, excuse me, it was released later as a live single from the next album, which was Lovers Live. I am not overly familiar with the two live albums
yeah.
that the
Neither am
band
I.
has put out. I've listened to them and they sound fantastic, but to me, the band is so good and she's such a great singer. It doesn't sound a whole lot different than the studio albums, other than maybe some solos and extended
Yeah,
things.
but I
So,
do like watching the live performances just because she's so comfortable on stage.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and I know in any one stage show, everything is choreographed, but like with her dancing and her interactions with the audience, it really feels like it's impromptu.
Yeah, it does. And what I found, I don't know a whole lot about her personally, but from what I have gathered over the years, she's a very much a private person.
Yes.
I found an old interview with her. It was from around it was right after the Soldier of Love album came out. It was a real brief clip with Wanda Sykes, and she was saying that she's pretty much, she lives on a farm. At least at that time, I guess she lived on a farm, just kind of this remote, quiet life. And
Yeah.
I know you mentioned a daughter. I think she has a son too.
Yeah.
But when she's on stage, I love when I see this with any kind of performers. How when they're in their element, you just see whatever shyness they might have.
Right.
They're doing their thing. They're feeling what they have a great passion for, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. Yeah, I've enjoyed those live clips too, even though I might not listen to the audio. Watching the live. Matter of fact, I'm rambling guy here. Sorry, it's because of this coffee. I'm holding up a coffee cup. YouTube people, it's a Bengals coffee cup. Just a reminder, the football season is starting soon, so go Bengals. I know you have another team, Jeff, but that's go Commanders too.
Or yeah, or whatever the name's going to be.
Yeah, whatever the
They
name's
change
going to
names
be.
every year now, apparently.
God, what the hell was the point I was trying to make there? Well, anyway, I can't remember. So let's move on. Let's jump forward a little bit further in time to the next album. All right, so there was a long gap there, 8 years between Love Deluxe and Lovers Rock. So let's go a little bit longer. Let's go 10 years to what Jeff is holding in his hand now, and that is the Soldier of Love album from 2010. How do you like that one?
I like this album a lot, and I actually thought a lot of the reviews when it came out were overly harsh on it because I felt like in a lot of ways it was kind of a return to form, even though they didn't really lose form per se on
Mm-hmm.
Lovers Rock, as we both discussed. It was probably more the audience than it was them. But I thought musically it felt modern, but still kind of harkened back to the traditional Sade sound. Uh, I think what people might have found missing subconsciously was the lack of those struggle songs. Because listening to it in that context, it does feel kind of ungrounded because for the first time, you don't have a clean heart or a Sally or a feel no pain. So it's just purely existing more in this space of romance.
Jeff, are you still there? Uh-oh.
And it's very good at it, but for that reason, it doesn't quite stick with me the way some of the others do.
Yeah, and I get that. And actually, I think we had a little glitch there in the recording, so hopefully we're going to be able to do the rest of this here. But I agree with you. Now that's another one too. I swear, I all of the albums since the first one I probably bought within the first week after they were
Yeah,
released, and it was the same with this. And I was excited about it because, my gosh, it had been 10 years, you know,
yeah,
and maybe especially so because I wasn't in love with Lovers Rock quite the way I
yeah.
wanted to be. I was excited about Soldier of Love. Played it a few times when it came out. I liked it, but it's another one too that it took me a while to get into it.
Yeah.
Probably mostly in the past week as I've been playing it over and over again. It's got a lot of great songs on
Oh,
it, and
yeah.
I was surprised at this, Jeff. I didn't realize how popular this one was either. It debuted at #1 in the U.S., and that was the first time that it happened for Sade since the Promise album in '85. There had been it's so 25 years between debuting at #1, and I think a lot of people were craving a new album by them
Yeah.
at that point.
And I think because by that point, we had moved on to the digital download era, it
Hmm.
became so much easier to procure an album that, a band that you love that's been away for a decade comes back, you're going to iTunes and you're clicking that
Yes,
purchase button.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, that was it's funny, you look back at 2010, and on one hand, it doesn't seem all that long ago, but it's pretty, it's 13 years ago. Things are a lot different back then, and that was an amazing time with downloads and
Yeah.
that was even probably, well, even before like Spotify and all those got to be so big. It was more, downloading and paying for things legally. There was a lot of illegal downloading going on back then too. But
But by that point, Sade's audience was older and they were
yes,
less likely to illegally download, which probably
yes,
also benefited Sade as far as charting. Because
yes,
I think we saw
definitely.
around that time a lot of legacy acts started doing better on charts for that reason, whether it was Prince or Springsteen or U2. Well, U2 kind of cheated because they made Apple stick the album in everyone's iPhone, but
Oh gosh, I
you get
forgot
the
about
general
that.
thrust of it.
Yes. Oh boy, that was there were a lot of unhappy people with that situation. But yeah, and what's great is I think it was shortly after the album came out that they toured. They didn't tour well for a long time. It had been probably, I guess, over 10 years, and that they had a
Yeah,
very
yeah, she was
successful
raising her
tour.
kids.
Yeah, yeah, and well, let's talk about some of the songs on Soldier of Love because, like you
Oh
said,
yeah.
lyrically, boy, some of their best songs, I think.
Oh yeah, I was just sort of making note of that, that probably three of my top 20 or so Sade songs are actually on here. With
Wow, what are those three?
being the title track, which that's like top five for me. Like I said,
Yeah.
that kind of feels like their mission statement.
Yes.
And I love what Stewart and I think it was Andrew did on the drums for that song. It
Oh, the
really,
drums are
yeah,
fantastic in there. I love the bass work in that song too.
yeah, yeah.
It's just
Uh,
such good
and,
music. I'm sorry, go ahead.
and talk about a defiant vocal from Sade Adu. Like, yeah, she's got some fire in her belly on that one. And it really is. 2010, we certainly hadn't gone all the way down the rabbit hole where we are now, but the hole was being dug.
Yes.
And it really was kind of a clarion call for love. So, yeah, that one's high up on my list. Uh, Baby's Father is kind of the next tier down, but I love that song as
Oh,
well.
that's such a great song.
And just the way she paints a picture, which is true in a lot of her storytelling songs, but it really shines through here because we are given a more positive portrait ultimately of really, well, kind of, I think the first verse of just kind of the happenstance of these two people meeting, and then ultimately kind of the birth of this child, transforming the young man into a man and helping him
Hmm.
grow. And really kind of a testament to the power of love. Again, not romantic love, but still love in kind of reaffirming our humanity. And then the third one that I really like is Bring Me Home, which
Oh yeah.
is one of the few Sade songs that you can put on a running playlist. I just love the
Yes.
impulsiveness
Yeah,
of
you're
that
right.
group.
Oh, I gotta do that.
Yeah.
I don't run so much anymore, but I'll listen to it on the elliptical next time I do that.
No, that's one, and it wasn't done on purpose. But yeah, one night I was running, and that came on kind of as the sun was going down, and I kind of had an existential moment there.
Oh, that's awesome. That is really awesome. And yeah, Baby Father is so good. And well, you talked about the lyrics and the growth of these characters that are being
Yeah,
sung about there. And I love now. I don't know who normally what member of the band normally sings along with her, or if it's just a mixture of them. But the male vocals on that are
it's
really good too.
usually, I think, one of the featured musicians, but not official band members. Oftentimes accompanies. Let's see. Yeah,
Right now, folks who are
featuring
listening to this, Jeff's looking at the liner notes of the CD.
Tony Marmalay and Leroy Osborne are credited among the featured players with
Oh,
vocals.
okay.
So it's probably one or both of them that we're hearing.
Oh, okay, great. I think Leroy Osborne too might have been on one of the Sweet Pack albums, right?
Probably
Yeah,
because he's been involved, if you look at the featured
with them.
players,
Yeah.
going back, I think, all the way to Promise.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
fantastic.
a lot of those longtime featured players are kind of de facto band members, I think, except they don't necessarily tour with the band. But
Right,
for the
right.
studio recordings, they do have their core musicians that they turn to augment kind of that core four.
And I love when I see that, how you see bands or singers, going back to the
Yeah,
same musicians over and over again. Like I think of even Daryl Hall and John Oates. Most of their
yeah.
albums were done with that same core group. And sometimes when they stray from that, well, sometimes it's not a good thing. But Sade knows what they're doing. And,
And I think
and
it definitely contributes to the consistency of the sound over the
yes,
years.
yeah. And like I had, alluded to that earlier too, is that they have been very, very consistent in their sound. And even, well, that album, like we said, came from 2010. And there's so many great songs on there. And they released a couple of songs. Did you hear the songs they put out a few years ago that were on movie soundtracks? There were two singles
Yeah.
released.
Yes, but I don't have a clear memory of them.
Okay. And I think I heard them like maybe once or twice when they came out in 2018. I listened to them again today and yesterday. And, there was a song from A Wrinkle in Time
Right,
called Flower of the Universe, and then one from Widows. I'm totally unfamiliar with that movie, called The Big Unknown. And those were both in 2018. Apparently, around that time, they actually started working on a new album too. But it's
right.
amazing to me how much they still sound like they did back in the 80s.
Yeah.
The music and her vocals, it's just incredible. And I don't want to stray too far from the Soldier of Love album because there's a little bit more we could probably talk about with that one. It's just man, it's got so many good songs. The ones you mentioned, I love, and I also like "Long Hard Road" a lot, and
Yeah.
"Be That Easy." Those are great
Yeah.
songs.
Really, the whole back half of the album
Yes.
is just solid. Uh, Now, kind of another resequencing or reconfiguring hot take. Take Immigrant and Slave Song off of Lovers Rock, put them on here in place of probably Morning Bird and, well, you could just take Morning Bird off and put those two in, and
Yeah.
the album still wouldn't be over long.
No,
And
no. I
I
think
think
that.
that would ground it and give it that weight that for me was
Yes.
missing. I think you do that. That's a five mic classic.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I that those would have. That would make the album so much better, and they would fit in perfectly there. And like you said, you would have
Yeah,
that nice blend, of the different kinds of songs lyrically, and just with the different feelings. And yeah, it's a great album. I'm glad I rediscovered that one too recently.
and do you remember was Skin used in a movie?
Ooh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I it feels like it's been somewhere, but yeah, I couldn't find any place that it had been. maybe it just feels like one of those songs
Yeah,
that could
maybe.
easily kind of land in some kind of neo sci-fi type of thing.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And so much of their music would easily fit into, well, all kinds of different
Yeah,
movies. And I don't know how much of, I mean, we mentioned No Ordinary Love earlier. I'm sure there have been others that have been in, Smooth Operator had to have been in some movie at some point or
yeah.
another.
But it seems like they're very selective about
Yes,
what they'll clear their music for, which I think is a good thing,
I agree.
because there haven't really been any Sade songs that have been ruined by overexposure in like cereal commercials, uh,
Yeah,
or just popping up in the closing credits of every other movie that comes out, which we have seen happen with certain songs in stretches,
yeah,
where I mean that's kind of happened to the Motown catalog, I think, to an extent, where you just hear snippets popping up in department stores and
it's true.
TV shows,
Yeah.
and it just kind
And,
of cheapens what they are.
it does, and seeing now how more and more legendary artists are selling their whole
Right.
catalogs, you're seeing that more and more. And yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a Sade song being used in any kind of advertisement. And if it happens, hopefully, I'm sure it'd be because of something that they feel really strongly
Yeah.
about. But
Yeah.
but I don't
And
see how their songs really, way too heavily towards advertising. It's not. Like
I,
I said, their lyrics are so
for like
deep.
Carnival Cruises or like Sandals Resorts, yeah, they have a
Yeah,
lot of
maybe.
songs that they could fit that vibe. Or come a Smooth Operator for like the new Gillette 12
That's
blade
a good
razor.
idea. That's a good idea. Now, I saw the Barbie movie the other day. As far as I recall, none of the songs were in the Barbie movie. Good movie, by the way, folks. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm hesitant because it just seems like a lot of Pink to sit through for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Well, I dyed my mustache and beard pink to go to the movie premiere the other night, and no, I did not do that. I did not do that. But no, it is actually very entertaining. What stinks though, and I'm gonna just a brief tangent here, is my wife and I went to see it, but we very rarely go to the movie theaters anymore, mainly because so many people were obnoxious when in
Yeah,
the theaters. We had these people in the same row as us who just would not shut up, and they were on their phone or holding up their phone. They were on a date. It seemed like it must have been a first date. They were just, I don't know, just ridiculous. And we're actually going to see Barbie again because we couldn't even hear it the way that we wanted to the first time.
yeah. I if it's a movie that I'm really interested in, especially if it's a big movie, I try to go to the first show of the day,
Yes.
because it kind of weeds out a lot of the people who see movies as an interactive experience.
Yes, yes, I feel the same way.
To put it nicely.
Ideally, I try to do that too. So, well, anyway, enough about Barbie. But like I said, those songs that the band put out in 2018, look for those online, folks, because they are really good. Again, they're "Flowers of the Universe" from A Wrinkle in Time, which I did not see, and "The Big Unknown" from Widows, which I did not see, and I don't even know what it's about. But the title's not doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun.
And we were supposed to be getting an album around that time.
Yeah, that they said around that time that they were working on one. But what I admire is I forget which of the members of the band said it in the interview I read, but they said that they just did not feel like they ever wanted to rush in the
Yeah.
recording process, which I admire. And we've seen that over the past 20 years or so. They obviously don't like to rush, and that's good because when they do put out their albums, they're top notch. But hopefully there will be something soon because 2018, here's some my great math skills. That was 5 years ago, so they should hopefully have something soon.
And I hope kind of they've stuck to their guns so far as the type of music they've made. I hope they continue to do that, because the trend now with all of these 2.5 minute songs to appease the streaming algorithms, I think that would be a huge disservice to a band like Sade that tends to let things unfold leisurely. So I hope they still give us those 4.5, 5, 6 minute songs, instead of trying to conform to what's needed now. As a, I understand the payment schemes, and a song has to be played through a certain percentage for the payment to register. but like
Right.
I just, well, actually the piece hasn't published yet, but I have a rant in one of my hip hop 50 playlist pieces that the Beastie Boys, yeah, but the final song on Paul's Boutique, which the name is slipping me now. Uh,
Yeah, I can't remember.
it's 12 minutes. They just go through like a bunch of different beat changes on the album. On
Right.
streaming now, you can only get the 20th anniversary version in which they break it up into 12 different sub 2 minute songs.
Oh, interesting.
And
Wow.
and
Yeah, I haven't heard it since I had the CD when it was brand
yeah,
new. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
I get why all these things are being done,
yeah.
but from an art standpoint, I just don't want to see Sade going to this kind of condensed 2.5 minute format just to get their
I
stream.
don't either. And I would hope, and judging by a lot of the things that we've already talked about in terms of, not seeing their works even show up in too many movies or ever in like
Yeah,
commercials, I would hope that they are going to stick to their guns and do things the way that they always have. And I'm encouraged by even the two songs that came out in 2018 because they did sound very much like something you would have heard on the albums in the 80s, 90s, and so on. But one thing I hope that they don't do either, Jeffrey, is feel the need, and you see this a lot with older acts, to bring in younger, hip, popular musicians as guests on their
yeah.
recordings. As much as I love someone like a Taylor Swift and some of the others who are popular right now, let them do their own thing. I don't think Sade needs to. I mean, if they feel the inspiration, and artistically they want to do that, then I'm sure they'll do a great job. But a lot of acts seem to be doing it just to get the sales.
And you just kind of got me thinking back, but I don't think there's ever been a duet on a Sade album. So they have remained incredibly self-contained,
Yes.
and I would certainly hope that continues, unless, like you said, there is somebody organically out there where it just comes together. I think a Maxwell duet, because he's worked with Stewart before,
Right.
and they're kind of in a similar lane, could be interesting. But yeah, I don't want to see Sade featuring Justin Bieber.
No. I think the last tour that they did, I know there were at least some tour dates with John Legend, and I wonder if he would be an interesting collaboration. But I don't know. I don't know about that. But
Uh,
let them stay in
yeah.
their own lanes there.
Yeah, but I do think uh, with those last two albums where she did kind of become a bit more personal in her songwriting, that it could lead to some interesting territory for a new album where, now she's in her 60s, she's
Hmm.
raised children. If she really kind of delves into that more, it's perspective you don't get much in popular music where everyone's trying to remain young. But I think
Right.
given their sound and given they have an audience that's grown with them, I think they could do that, and it would be a way of helping a new album feel fresh while still sticking with that basic Sade sound that everyone expects.
Yes. And it's funny. I don't think I said this earlier. I was thinking it though. Is that I think we both may have, I don't know if you did this or not, but there was a thing going around on Medium where people were asking musical questions, like 10 musical questions, like what is the
Yeah,
one act you haven't seen in concert yet that you would want to see? And Sade was the only one that I could even think of.
yeah,
I've,
they would be one of mine, absolutely.
yeah, you haven't seen them either?
No, and I don't know why I didn't go to the Soldier of Love tour, because I was writing for OK Player at that time.
Mhm.
I probably could have gotten like backstage access. So I don't. I can't imagine they didn't come to the DC area, so I don't know why I just kind of let that pass and didn't try to do that. Maybe I just assumed it'd be another one, but given the recent
Right.
history, I should I should have known better than that.
And I think I may have had the same kind of thought. It's like, oh, I'll catch them on the next tour, and then a
Yeah,
decade passes, and it's so infrequent that I go to concerts now. And that was kind of the point I was making when I had replied in that article, is that there are very few artists that I would pay the high concert prices
yeah,
for anymore because they're just so outrageous now. But Sade, I would think I would make an exception. And I live not far from Philadelphia, so if they tour,
yeah.
I'm sure they would hit that area.
Even though I would hope at this point, and I know they have done arena tours, but I would hope, as if they have kind of gotten to that point where their audience is aging and the crowds are generally going to be smaller, I'd love to see them in a theater setting with, two or
Oh
three
yeah,
thousand people.
that would be fantastic. And like we said, I think they can still, even with like the large gaps in between their albums and their tours, I think in a lot of ways they can call their own shots. Any
Yeah.
promoter is going to want to work with them and
Oh
do
yeah.
things the way that they want to. Yeah, I agree with you. It would be great to see them in a smaller venue like that. That's my preferred choice now. I don't like going to the big arenas anymore
Yeah.
with like where it's in excess of like 40, 50,000 people.
Yeah, especially with the kind of disaster we just had here with Beyonce's show when it came to FedEx Field, and then there were the massive thunderstorms, so they weren't
Mm,
letting people in, and it looked like a
yeah.
riot was about to break out for a minute. So
Oh, I didn't actually hear about that. That sounds horrible though.
yeah,
Oh gosh.
yeah, I'm with you. I tend to prefer smaller venues anyway, and certainly for an act like Sade, where so much of the music really does have an intimate feel to it. I think a
Yes.
small venue would be ideal,
That would be
especially
ideal.
especially since we might not get another one anytime
Yeah,
soon. So I'd really hope that they kind of make it a connective experience with the fans.
I hope so too. And I got to tell you, I have loved talking with you about Sade and just re-exploring this music
Oh
and
yeah,
really in a way that I hadn't before. Because like we both said, we had different things going on in our lives at different times where maybe we didn't pay attention to them as much as in retrospect we would have liked to have. And it's been great diving back into this music. And only six studio albums, since 1984, but
right.
oh, they're so
And yeah,
good.
in almost 40 years.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it is amazing. And what to me is most amazing is that the quality never slipped. I mean,
Right.
yes, obviously there are some things we enjoyed more than others, but the quality was always
Yeah.
there.
And I think that really is, it comes down to personal taste. That I'm sure there's some people out there who would say, we're both crazy. Lovers Rock is a 5-star album, and that's my
Yeah,
favorite. And they would have a coherent argument for that.
yeah, I think you're right. And that's the thing. Music is so subjective.
Yeah.
What I love, you might not love, and vice versa. And I'll tell you, though, I can't see myself ever not loving this music, and especially those two albums in particular. The first one, Diamond Life, and Love Deluxe. They're
Yeah.
just to me two of my all time favorite albums.
Which are my two favorites also. I just have them in the opposite order.
The opposite. Well, Jeff, I thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Gotta Pop, and I thank everyone who's listening or watching this. And look for Jeffrey's pieces. I'm going to put a link to your Medium page in the notes for this. And also, I'm going to have a piece up probably by the time this airs or shortly afterwards, just on the first album, on Diamond Life. I have a publication that I do on medium.com called First Album Reviews that has actually been dormant for several months, but I'm going to revive that and talk about where I covered like the debut albums of different artists. So I'm going to cover this since it's one of my all-time favorite albums.
Yeah,
And
and my struggle songs of Sade piece will probably be up somewhere around that time also. So you've got homework, everybody.
that's right, you got homework, but gosh darn it, it's going to be fun homework for you all. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure, and we will find something else to talk about, and hopefully you'll return and we'll do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Excellent,
Thank
my
you.
friend. Everybody have a great day, and I don't know, just go have fun. Listen to good music, have fun, go see the Barbie movie, and read Buddy and Jeff's pieces on medium.com. All right, thanks again, folks. See ya.